Defend, Escape, Control, Submit, Super Seminar, Part 3, Control. Hito, take us all the way down.
So this is one of the most neglected parts, right, of the 4 parts, is the control. When you land in a position of superiority, a position of offense, you're on top of somebody, we're too quick to move into a submission. Everybody wants to get to the submission as soon as possible. You've talked about this in the original breakdown. But now let's get into the 3 parts of control and why each part is so important. Starting with closed control. And closed, what I mean when I say closed, is this idea of just, really relying on your grip, holding. However you want to lock down, whatever grip you want. Sometimes I'm here and I'm like holding his pants over here. I'm holding his gi under his arm. My hips are low.
So it's a fixed grip usually,
Yes.
lockdown mode. Think of it lockdown.
So it relies a little bit more on grips and maybe a little more strength. Of course, body positioning is good and can help you a lot, but sometimes you tend to be a little more tense in closed control, which this is important. There is a time for this. And Rener explains that when the person is very squirmy, especially somebody similar
The little
size.
T-cities, the little squirrely, flexible, guys who can get their limbs in places and get out really squirrely ways. Lockdown on them works good, like just immobilization, full immobilization.
Now, even with the squirrely person, but especially with a much bigger person,
300 pounds.
right? You might have moments where you're very tight, but the bigger they get, if you're too tight, then you're fixing yourself to them.
Yeah.
So there needs to be, as I'm tight, I need to recognize when my control is helping you.
Yes.
And I need to change the way I go about controlling. So we now call this open control. It's more reliant on, body positioning, and the first one also was, but gravity, and not so fixed in my grips, but hands out very wide, low hips, just really utilizing pressure. And this is something that, it's more difficult because when especially if you fear being on the bottom, if you don't have a good defense, when you're on top of somebody, you're gonna hold them very fear-based, very tense, where opening up and putting a hand out, it relies on you being comfortable and you knowing that even if you fall, you will be okay. So the combination of closed and open is what we want. We want people to know when to be tight, but know when to say, you know what? I'm losing it. Let go. Know when to change to knee on belly. Like even right now. So freeze. We're now working a little bit into open control, multiple positions, which is very important. So from side mount to knee on belly, he rolled to his knees. I was on his back. Did I lose control? Not necessarily. I'm still behind him. So following somebody around like this, again, it can only happen if you're not worried about being on the bottom. If you're worried, you're gonna hold on too tight, and that's why you see stuff like this. Move this way a little bit, roll. Where people like roll to their knees slowly. Go ahead, roll. And guys, take the back. Now go on your knees, and then you see this, right? Where they're losing the position because they were so scared that they held, and they fell off. Instead of, go ahead, keep rolling this way, other way, boom, letting go and not being so scared, but following the person a little more. Perfect.
So what I just felt and what I'm hearing is that it just feels, if from a real simple explanation in terms of tactical implementation here, closed is really fixed grips and lockdown position and mindset. Open is not fixed grips, mobile grips, mobile base points, and really a commitment to just stay on top of the fight, just floating. It feels very floaty. You don't feel controlling, but also floaty in the sense that he was not committed to any one grip or position. He was willing to change a hand to keep the control and keep me underwater, and was more concerned with keeping me underwater than grabbing onto me and then taking a dominant, even if it meant back mount. He just wants to stay on top and just float and control.
Especially in this example of side mount, it's about being on top. But it could be guard. Bottom of guard, you're very snug, but also kind of an open guard, and always having a foot on the hip and being able to control guard, keeping somebody from passing your guard with more of an open guard.
Yeah, another good example, lay down please, is this idea of interlocking shoulders here, right? So this idea that if open control is really understanding how our shoulders interlocking can really keep someone under control. For example, if I'm here, this is great. If he reaches this way, bridge, no, inside. Bridge, bridge, bridge. You see how the fact that our shoulders interlock here, he can't roll. And then if he goes towards me, my neck is here. If he goes over my head, watch what I do. I go here, boom, bridge, bridge, bridge. Now go the other way with the other hand. I come back to make sure that I always have anchors. Underhook this arm over here. Look, underhook this arm. I grab his leg right here and I lay him out. Come out the back door on the other side. Look, I have my shoulder trapping his shoulder and I grab his armpit, hug my neck. I come back over here. So this ability to use legs, all these controls, and understand the best possible control relative to where his shoulders and limbs are to keep him as immobilized as possible, open control.
This is so difficult to do. It's so hard to change. Remember, changing, moving your arm, there's a risk in moving your arms.
Because you're disconnected
from position to position. But when you've traveled these paths many times and you understand how changing gives you so much more leverage,
so much
you're going to do it. You're going to be quick to do it.
That's what I said before we started the video here. I was like, man, in my mindset, if I'm on someone who's just small and like their knees and feet tend to fill all spaces, you got to be careful with open control because they're going to get their limbs in. If I do this with Brian, he's going to put me in the guard, or even with heat on, it's tough. But when I go against a guy who is that small, I want to shut down and make as little movement as possible because I want to prevent there from being gaps for leaks of limb entries, especially when it comes to guard recovery. Because what are the chances that someone who's lighter than me just crazy rolls me and puts me on my back out of nowhere?
That's what I was going to say. It comes to knowing what somebody's capable of.
What the threat is to me. Yes. And against the smaller person who's squirrely, the threat is getting me in their guard. So preventing that means more lockdown, less movement. And that's why a lot of people are very good at that in competition, BJJ. They get very good at lockdown controls and less at the dynamic moving controls because they're fighting more people their same weight. And against someone your same size, right, the chance of them just bench pressing you is not as good or not as high as someone who outweighs you by 2 or 3 weight classes. So it's something to keep in mind is that if you're very lockdown focused, that's cool against someone your size or smaller, but the second you get on someone barrel chested at 275 pounds, locking down on them almost does no good because literally they sneeze and you fly off. You know what I'm saying? So you got to be very open, non-committal with your grips, and just do whatever you can to keep them underwater and use concepts like these interlocking shoulders to keep them as flat on their back for as long as possible.
Yes. So I love it. So a combination of these two are what we, I would say 90% of our control is a combination of these.
Yep.
And the toughest opponents are the ones that require us using both.
Yes.
And I think we are those opponents.
Yeah.
Like, I can't just use closed or open with you.
Mm-hmm.
I need to use both. And I need to also sometimes use dynamic control. Because it gets to a point where Rener is so, he goes for an elbow escape and then a bridge and then a roll and then a twist. There's so much happening that to slow him down on his escape attempts, I need to bring something else, introduce something else to the party. And what that is it could be cross chokes. It could be some sort of threat. If we're wearing gloves, it could be small strikes. So I need to do something to make my control a little more dynamic. I need to keep him, almost paralyze him. And it makes you think less about escaping and more about defending.
Then Hidon's only fighting 50% of my escape attempts versus 100% escape attempts because I have to be 50% focused on my own protection because if I forget that, he'll submit me.
And that's for you. And depending on somebody's confidence on defense, it might kind of stifle them even more.
80%, 90%, they're like
happening.
Flustered. And we've seen that happen a lot. So, I'll throw 2 punches, someone's complete escape strategy goes out the window, and they get all flustered, and then I can do whatever I want because they're not in an escape position.
Now, you don't want to begin, it's tricky to begin attacking from like a knee on belly, for example, if you haven't spent time controlling side mount to knee on belly to side mount, knee on belly to the other side, knee on belly to him rolling to his knees, I'm on his back. So you really want to become comfortable closed and open before you introduce the idea of submissions or striking. But there's also the idea of using like just movement of my, for example, right now, he's gonna escape based off where I am right now. But at the moment I land, here, go ahead, escape, I start to switch, right? And then I'm switching around him. Now, it could be a little bit exaggerated for some of you, but the point is that my movement, he's never really able to pinpoint where I am to begin the escape.
That's very dynamic. So it's threats, submission, strikes, and movement to really throw me off, to where my escape strategies as planned cannot be implemented because of the threats and confusion that's being thrown. They're flashbangs. It's like, dang, I gotta worry about this and that and that and that and that. I can never really focus on just what I want to do.
Yes. Now, one disclaimer: there's no doubt that when you mix closed, open, and dynamic, there's also risk that if this person has it all together and they're very intelligent, good defense, that you are maybe even giving them more space, right? So if they don't, take to covering the way you expected, you should probably cut back and be less dynamic. Too much moving around is giving you more opportunities. But you have to ask the question is, how much movement do you want from me when I'm on top? You want more. You want more than less. So with someone like Rener, because it's so even, he's so good, I don't suggest. For myself, I wouldn't be too floaty. I'm gonna fall back more to closed with hints of open. And why hints of open? Right. Because you're more likely to technically bring a knee in than you are to explode. And the hints of open are for the little bumps here or there that I might need when you do those, the 20% big moves. Big explosions.
Show him how you do your attacks from knee on belly. That one of the most common sequences for Hito from here is he'll be knee on belly and he'll swim under and choke me at the same time. The arm isolation, you go in, start to pry for the choke, and now I swim, he goes down, then he gets his underhook here, and he's choking me all at the same time. So that went from, how he went from control to creating threat and isolations where any escapes that I thought of doing are completely hindered by the threat and the submission approach that's happening there. And of course, that might turn into a submission.
Yes.
Or it might just remain an annoyance and a flashbang to deter my escape.
Yes. Remember, everything falls back to a good defense. If your defense is solid, you will be on top and you will be more comfortable. And that comfort will show. It will show in how you transition from closed to open to dynamic. You're not so worried about losing, whether it's guard, mount, or side mount control, because if you do, you're finding your way back there again. Now, most importantly, when you control someone, spend time controlling with nothing else in mind. Just be in the position of control. And when you do this, the bottom person is gonna give you submission.